All right, we're going to start this first skeletal system lecture. This one will be rather short. Again, skeletal system. It's in chapter 6, I believe it is. All right, components of the skeletal system. These are the bones, which is a connective tissue. It is the matrix. What we normally think of as bone is what we call the matrix. It's hardened calcium, phosphate, and some other minerals. Again, that's the matrix. It's a non-living portion of the bone. There's some cells in there too. We have cartilage, which is another connective tissue, and this is usually found at the ends of the bones. Again, for cushioning the joint. And then we have ligaments and tendons, actually, also. But ligaments connect bones to bones, so that they're more of a component of the skeletal system, while tendons connect muscles to the bone. So there's a difference. Remember the difference between them. Ligaments connect bones to bones, tendons connect muscles to bones. The functions of the skeletal system. Mainly support. Again, we protect, getting support. We wouldn't be able to stand up if we didn't have this. We wouldn't have maintain our shape. Would be more of a blob. Gives us protection. We got a built-in helmet up here with our skull. So all of our vital organs are protected by some. Again, the skull protects one thing. The rib cage protects the heart and lungs. Those are vital organs. Bones act as levers so that we can move. Muscles pull on the bones. Muscles do not push. All they do is pull. And because they attach to various bones, and they're able to move them around like levers. We have some electrolytes and some acids that we store in here with the calcium phosphates, ions, as we need to balance the pH of the blood and for contractions. We also use this as alkaline again, for the pH of it. Calcium and phosphate, a lot of it is in nerve impulses, muscle contractions. When we get to those units, you will understand that a bit more. And then blood formation. Blood is made in the bones, all right? Specifically in the center of the bone marrow, and even more specific is the red bone marrow. The shapes of bones, we have 4 shapes. We have long bones, and long bones are longer than they are wide. So even your knuckle right here, this bone is longer this way than it is this way. So this is a long bone. Most of the long bones are in the limbs. So the arms all the way out to the fingers and your legs down to your toes. Pretty much all of those are long bones. We have some short bones also. Most of these are, again, located at the wrist and the ankles, okay? We have some flat bones. The skull, even though it's round, is considered a flat bone. Your sternum is a flat bone. Your ribs are flat bones. Your shoulder blade's a flat bone. So these are going to be thinner bones, and that's why they get called flat. And then you have irregular shaped bones. There's your vertebrae and your hip bones, because they're just kind of odd shaped on these, so they're make it complicated. So those are irregular. Again, long bones are not necessarily long. They're just longer than they are wide. All right. Again, think of that finger. It's not very long, but it's longer than it is wide. Excuse me there. Again, here's some pictures of them. Long bone. Flat bone, short bone, and it's an irregular bone. Features of these bones. The outer portion of a bone is made up of compact bone. This is very dense and very hard, and it provides a lot of strength for the bones. Right? On the inside, we have what we call spongy bone, and this allows blood vessels to pass through more easily, for us to have bone marrow in there. It takes weight away from the bone, but still gives it strength. Think of it like scaffolding inside of the scaffolding for like a bridge. It's the same way, it's scaffolding inside your bones. And then again, you have the bone marrow, which is on the inside. It's soft. It's a really soft tissue. Red bone marrow is used for making blood. Yellow bone marrow is used for storing fats and minerals and electrolytes, things like that. The scaffolding of spongy bone is called trabeculae, right here. In the skull, it gets a special name called diplo. We'll get to that in another slide, another lecture maybe. So we're just going to focus on a long bone, all right? The features and general features of a long bone. The shaft of the long bone is called a diaphysis. All right, you need to know these terms. All right. The very ends of the bones are called the epiphysis. You'll have a proximal epiphysis and a distal epiphysis, depend upon, again, the point of attachment, because those are your directional terms. The epiphysis are filled with, do have bone marrow inside them. When you're in utero, the actual epiphysis is one bone and the diaphysis is another bone, and as you get older, they fuse together to become one bone. You got the medullary cavity on the inside. This is where the bone marrow is. This is where all that scaffolding with the spongy bone. And then again, where the epiphysis and the diaphysis come together, this is called the epiphyseal plate. It's wider in a child or a young teenager who is growing still. And as you get old, once you stop growing, it's just kind of a thin line that you can see on an x-ray. Because, well, it's not expanding, so it's not going to be you're not growing anymore, so it's not going to expand. That's why it's a thin line. Periosteum is the membrane that surrounds the outside of the bone. Anytime you see peri is always talking about an outside. So this is the membrane, again, surrounds the outside of a long bone. Muscles attached to the periosteum use a tendon. If you remember, muscles attached to bones by a tendon. You have perforating fibers, and these are, again, this is that specific spot where the tendons do bind to the bone. It is part of the periosteum. You have foramina. Foramina means hole. Foramina is singular. Foramen is singular. Foramina is plural. And this is holes so that blood vessels and nerves can get into a bone. Otherwise, they can't get into the bone. You can't give nutrients and remove waste from things. So there are holes periodically in the bone for blood vessels and nerves. The endosteum, this is the membrane that lines the inside of the bone, the medullary cavity, where the spongy bone is, where the bone marrow is. Then you have articular cartilage, and this is at the ends of the bones. Again, it's that cushioning where two bones come together as a joint, so you're going to have cartilage on each side of it. That's your articular cartilage. So in the pictures, we can kind of see where everything's at. Again, there is an epiphysis. You have another one down here. Again, they distinguish them between proximal and distal. The spongy bone on the inside. You have that epiphyseal line. Your compact bone, you can see a little bit better right over here, is on this outside. Then your spongy bone is on the inside. Again, these foramina, these holes, are where the blood vessels can enter. You see one right down here. The periosteum is that membrane around the outside. The endosteum is this darker color on the inside that lines all the bone on the inside. You see the articular cartilage, the blue right here at the top of this epiphysis, and again at the end of this epiphysis. This is the humerus, by the way. Again, there's that medullary cavity in the middle. They're showing you having, at this point, they're showing it being yellow marrow. Know all these parts. Again, the outer flat bones, again, outer side is going to be hard. You're going to have the tissue covering it, the periosteum covering. You're going to have the spongy bone on the insides. And again, these are all between in every bone. It's this way. Again, diplo is the special name for spongy bone in the skull. All right. They're the same thing, but this is a special term. In anatomy, a lot of terms are based on location. They can be the same thing, but they give them a different name and a different location. So that kind of makes anatomy a little bit complicated because of that. Again, you see that spongy bone. It is called diplo in the skull. That's what this here is. And you can see that scaffolding, which is that trabeculae. Bone cells. Start off with the osteogenic cells. These are the stem cells that are going to grow dependent upon hormones and needs of the body. These cells, when they divide, they'll mature into any of the other types of cells, depending upon what the body needs. So these are, again, the stem cells that'll become all bone cells. We have osteoblasts. These are important ones. These are the ones that form bones. So these are the ones that are going to deposit and build up bones. So if you were to break a bone, you're going to need more osteoblasts to fix that bone. And as you're growing, you're going to have lots of osteoblasts, again, because your bone is growing. As we get older, we don't need as many of them because our bones aren't growing. We have osteocytes. These live inside of inside the bone in little cavities called lacunae. We got pictures coming up. Then they have little projections coming out. Think of them kind of like an octopus or something. But they don't actually touch, but these projections can communicate with other cells, other osteocytes, and this is how we know when there's pain or we need, our body needs to fix something in our bone. Then we have osteoclasts. These are kind of a macrophage. Macrophages eat stuff. So these are the bone dissolving, because these are specific ones. They're going to just dissolve bone. And our bones are constantly being dissolved and rebuilt. So we have osteoclasts and osteoblasts all the time. All right. And they use hydrochloric acid to dissolve bone. All right, so the histology of a bone. This is called an osteon. This is the main, these little circles are called osteons right here. This is the main structure of a bone. And these little dark cavities inside of it, those are called lacunae. And inside those little cavities are where those osteocytes are located in. Because the rest of this, all this white material that you're seeing, this is the matrix. It is non-living material. Now you see these little cracks in the artificial drawing here. You can see about these little cracks are called canaliculi, and the osteocytes that sit in these cavities, they have little cytoplasmic projections that go in there, and they communicate and they transfer nutrients and waste from cell to cell, so that they can get it from the blood, because there's actually no blood in the bone right there, right next to those tissues. You have these concentric circles going around them. Those are called lamellae. And you find them around, you'll find them in groups of 3 around each osteon. Then you'll have some circumferential ones that go all the way around the outside of the bone. And again, this gives us support. These osteons are structural that support the bone, give it the strength. So there's the 3 layers of them. Remember that the osteocyte is inside the cavity. The cavity itself is called a lacunae. You need to know these pictures on this slide also. All right, bone marrow is the soft material inside the medullary cavity. Again, red bone marrow contains red bone cells, hence the name red bone marrow. And this is where blood cells are produced. All blood cells, whether it's a white blood cell or a red blood cell or a platelet, they are produced in the red bone marrow. And then children have much more red bone marrow than adults. As we get older, we don't need as much. So a lot of our bone marrow turns into yellow bone marrow, which is where we store fats and nutrients and stuff in there. If for some reason we need to produce more red blood cells, we can convert that yellow bone marrow back to red bone marrow to produce red blood cells. That is the last slide. Again, if you have any questions, email me. Have a good day.